civilization, we're up to the 2011. Look forward 10 years. How do you think the world will look then?
Well, if you take a 10-year time horizon, I think we talked earlier about how likely it was that by 2021, China's will be the biggest economy in the world. That's probably the easiest thing to forecast. It's a little harder to forecast what Europe will look like. There's a significant chance right now that the crisis in the Eurozone could get worse. And I fully expect it to get worse. I don't think it's guaranteed that the euro will still exist in 2021. And that could be a surprise for those people who argue insistently that we have no alternative but to be part of an ever deeper and closer European Union. The United States has a choice right now. In 2021, we'll know which way it chose. It could go down the route of Europeanizing itself, creating a welfare state that it can't afford, allowing unemployment to become a permanent feature of life for young people, or it could take some tough decisions now and go down the route of revitalizing itself in the way that it did in the 1980s under Ronald Reagan. I don't know which way it'll go. We'll know, I guess, next year who is going to run for the Republican presidency against Barack Obama, and a lot will depend on what the outcome of that race is. The really interesting question that we have to ponder right now is what the Middle East will look like in 10 years' time. As I said, there's a tiny possibility that could all end very happily with democracies of a Western style emerging in countries like Egypt and who knows even. But I would be very surprised if that happened. I think it's much more alarming to imagine a world in which Saudi Arabia is no longer a feudal monarchy, but is actually an Islamic republic in the same way that Iran became an Islamic republic in 1979. And if we find ourselves living next to a restored caliphate in which radical Islam is the ideology not just of Iran but the entire region, then the world will have changed in a way that is much more threatening to the security of Europeans, including Britons, than anybody today seems to be taking seriously.
You mentioned the Eurozone there, and we've talked about debt defaults. Do you think it's likely that somebody this year will leave or either default on their debts or actually quit, like the Irish have threatened to do, and reinvent the punt?
Well, I certainly think it's likely that there's going to be a default, although it won't be called that. It'll have a polite name like rescheduling, or it'll be called restructuring, anything but the D word. I don't think anyone's going to exit the currency because the cost of doing that would be pretty high. So we're in a kind of interesting situation right now of shadow boxing in which governments that have just been elected, as in Ireland, or are in deep trouble, as in Greece, threaten to do dreadful things if they aren't given a better deal. And the critical part of the problem is Germany. The Germans are in two minds about this. Part of the German political elite remains convinced that its future lies in Europe and that it has to write checks for the wayward brethren of the European periphery. But a very large part and a growing part of the German public has had enough of doing that and regards handouts to Greeks and Irish and Portuguese as money down the drain. That's really the critical issue. And when one looks at Angela Merkel's government right now, it is in a dreadfully weakened state. She's just lost her key rising star, the defense minister, who turned out to have plagiarized almost his entire PhD. She's on the ropes, and she's going to get another couple of punches with regional elections coming up. You know, 10 years from now, I wonder where Germany will be. I wonder how far Germany will still be committed to the notion of European integration as the #1 priority of German foreign policy. So that's another real imponderable right now. And I think many people assume, wrongly, that the world is going to look a lot like the world today a decade from now. I think we will be amazed in 2021 how much has changed in that intervening 10 years.
Niall Ferguson, thank you very much indeed.